At 9:52 a.m. on September 11th, the National Security Agency, the U.S. intelligence organization responsible for monitoring global communications, intercepted a phone call. A known associate of al-Qaeda, calling from Afghanistan to the Republic of Georgia, celebrated the good news and hinted a fourth target would soon be hit. To understand how a stateless network operating out of Afghan caves managed to orchestrate a catastrophic strike against the world's reigning superpower, we have to rewind the clock. In 1979, Soviet forces invaded Afghanistan. To counter the communist expansion, the United States and its allies began funneling money and weapons through Pakistan to support local Mujahideen resistance fighters. Millions of dollars in military aid flowed into the region with almost zero oversight. American political and military leaders gave little thought to exactly which extremist groups were receiving these weapons, or who would be left holding power once the Soviets retreated. The son of wealthy Saudi Arabian elites, Osama bin Laden traveled to Afghanistan to join the fight. He used his family's wealth and his organizational skills to unite scattered factions of Arab volunteers into a cohesive military resistance. By focusing entirely on defeating their Cold War rival, the United States poured resources into a volatile power vacuum, inadvertently helping to build an extremist infrastructure it did not fully understand. A decade later, in 1990, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. The aggression posed an immediate threat to neighboring Saudi Arabia, a nation with abundant oil fields but a relatively weak national military. Fearing an Iraqi invasion, King Fahd of Saudi Arabia had to make a choice. Bin Laden offered to defend the kingdom with his battle-hardened Arab Legion. Instead, King Fahd accepted an offer of direct military assistance from the United States. Bin Laden was furious. He believed the deployment of non-Muslim American troops near Islam's holiest shrines in Mecca and Medina was an unforgivable cultural and religious offense. That single geopolitical decision redirected al-Qaeda's growing network. Their holy war pivoted away from communist invaders and locked its sights directly on the United States. As the timeline moved into the 1990s, the threat began to accelerate. Bin Laden started a campaign explicitly targeting American symbols and personnel. On February 26, 1993, a rented van packed with explosives detonated in the parking garage beneath the World Trade Center. The blast killed 6 people, injured 1,000 more, and left a massive crater, marking the first major physical manifestation of this terror network on American soil. The American response was hindered by its own legal and bureaucratic systems. Intelligence officers at the CIA managed to track bin Laden to Sudan, but without formal indictments or hard evidence linking him directly to the attacks, they lacked the legal basis to authorize a capture or kill mission. This global map shows how bin Laden operated with total agility while the U.S. navigated legal frameworks. He hijacked domestic infrastructure, taking over the national Afghan airline and using it as a private taxi service to move militants, weapons, and cash across international borders. The violence escalated rapidly. Bin Laden issued a formal declaration calling for the deaths of American civilians, and in 1998, synchronized truck bombs tore through the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, killing over 200 people. By the turn of the millennium, a borderless, highly mobile network had completely outmaneuvered the slow-moving legal frameworks of the world's dominant superpower. A direct collision was inevitable. That collision arrived on the morning of September 11, 2001. At 5:45 a.m., the timeline shrinks from decades to minutes. This flowchart illustrates the first fatal vulnerability at the airport checkpoints. The Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, the government body regulating civil aviation, had a computer system that successfully flagged several of the hijackers for additional screening. However, existing protocols dictated that this flag only required security to check their checked luggage for explosives, entirely bypassing physical searches of their persons. The hijackers then passed through the metal detectors. Even when they set off the alarms, security personnel failed to confiscate their weapons because FAA regulations at the time explicitly permitted passengers to carry knives with blades shorter than 4 inches on board. Starting at 8:19 a.m., the hijackers took control of their respective flights. On the ground, confusion reigned as air traffic control picked up accidental radio transmissions from the cockpits, and the military scrambled unarmed fighter jets into the sky, much too late to intercept the threats. The attackers did not overwhelm American defenses with superior firepower or advanced technology. They quietly slipped through the rigid, bureaucratic cracks of aviation security. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Initially, emergency responders and the public assumed a horrible freak aviation accident had occurred. Then, at 9:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175 banked into the South Tower. The illusion of an accident shattered instantly. Live on television, the world realized the United States was under attack. At 9:37 a.m., a third plane crashed into the west side of the Pentagon. In response, the FAA executed SCATANA. This stands for the Security Control of Air Traffic and Air Navigation Aids, a national emergency plan that immediately grounded all civilian air traffic across the entire country. At 10:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 93 crashed into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Learning of the earlier attacks, the passengers launched a desperate revolt against their hijackers, forcing the plane down and likely saving the U.S. Capitol building from destruction. This diagram demonstrates the structural failure of the Twin Towers, which began at 9:59 a.m. Tens of thousands of gallons of burning jet fuel created extreme heat that softened the steel support beams. As the compromised steel buckled, the enormous weight of the upper floors triggered a rapid pancake effect, collapsing each level underneath it in a matter of seconds. In just 102 minutes, the attacks claimed 2,977 lives, abruptly ending an era of perceived American invulnerability. The geopolitical reaction was massive. The United States launched a decades-long clandestine military campaign that systematically dismantled the al-Qaeda network and eventually tracked down and eliminated Osama bin Laden. The events of September 11th remain a grim, permanent reminder of the realities of modern asymmetrical warfare. Even the world's most massive, technologically advanced militaries can be outmaneuvered by a patient network willing to exploit the smallest, quietest blind spots in the system.